welcome back to another home team episode. Again, half of the home team only, just me and Dennis. Last week it was me and MDV. We got the big guy doing big guy things in San Diego. He's at the muster with Echelon Front, so speaking there, leading those guys through fitness, doing some cool stuff. And I know MDV had something come up last minute, but we're going to keep it rolling, man. Excited to have you on. It's so funny. I read this thing, it must have been like last year, and I never went through this. You probably did. You're a drummer. But they were saying that like asking a friend to like start a podcast is like the millennial equivalent of like asking to start a band.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely never experienced that. And I'm hardly a drummer. No. And I was definitely never asked to join a band.
Oh, man. But you drum. Does that make you a drummer?
I guess. Yeah, I guess you can qualify that as, yeah, I suppose.
Anyway, the whole reason I brought that up is like, I feel like me and you have talked about like having a podcast for like 2 years. We even like recorded an episode that never made it
That's right.
on air.
I remember that. Yeah.
And here we are, just you and me on the Jason Khalipa podcast.
Let's go.
Came full
Manifested.
circle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but cool, man. The intention of these home team episodes was always just to like, who can make it on, makes it on, and we just chat. So you and me today, I did want to, and I know you wanted to talk about this too. The reason that you weren't on last week is because you kind of got kicked on your butt a little bit. So tell us what happened a little bit, man, because I think that there are some really good takeaways there. And I know one of the questions that I've seen come up a lot, you know, we get replies to this in the email. We get people that ask about it, you know, through the podcast and stuff of like when to push it, like when to train through, whether it's injury or illness. So I think that we can definitely take your experience and kind of, you know, how that was and hopefully some takeaways and some real things to consider when people that I know that listen, that love fitness, love working out, it's part of their routine, start feeling like they're either a little burnt out or coming down with something and how to navigate those waters. So why weren't you here last week?
I missed 2 weeks.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I got completely knocked on my ass. And my own, I didn't get any kind of official diagnosis. My own self-diagnosis after the fact was COVID into pneumonia. Can I still have like kind of lingering effects of the pneumonia? You could probably hear it in my voice. My lungs are still like a little bit scorched. So yeah, it was a solid 10 days of just being completely out of commission, not being able to do anything. And, you know, listen, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. Like I wasn't on my deathbed. Certainly people have been significantly more ill than I was. But that, to put it in perspective, that was the sickest I've ever been in my life for the longest period of time. I've never experienced anything like that. I've always been, for decades now, someone that gets sick for a day or two. I bounce right back. I'm pretty much right back at it, back at baseline pretty quickly. I've been fortunate in that sense. I mean, part of that is obviously I take good care of myself, but this just, this was something I never experienced before. Just 10 days solid, like completely out of commission.
And 2 weeks ago, I feel like we were having exactly that conversation because I was telling you that the kids were sick and like Ariel had gotten sick and like knock on wood, you know, I had 24 hours of like definitely feeling a little run down, but I didn't even have to skip a workout, like trained right through it.
Yep.
And then I always have like a little bit of like lingering runny nose, lingering cough, but like nothing that like set me back on my butt. And we were talking about exactly that, like being super fortunate that don't tend to get really sick. For me, being 2-3 days completely out of commission is like a nightmare. It's so frustrating.
Same.
I can't imagine over a week.
Yeah. Yeah. It was wild. And you know, I think like the first big takeaway from it was without your health, you have nothing. I mean, it was just your world completely contracts down to like, you can't think or focus or care about anything else other than how terrible you feel. And, you know, it's just maybe a microcosm of like someone that is experiencing like chronically relatively ill health on a regular basis. And their baseline is like pretty dampened and pretty low just in terms of how they feel day in and day out. You just realize like life is just so much harder when you don't have good health and how important it is. And like you just hope that people appreciate that. And it has to be like a top 3 priority for everyone across
all the time.
Board. Yeah. All the time.
Yeah. What's the saying is like, you know, you can have 100 problems, but if your health's a problem, you have just one. I think that's the saying. I might be butchering it, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever the saying is, that captures it pretty eloquently, right? I mean, yeah, like there was just nothing else happening in the world. Like, obviously, still had to be a dad. I still had to be a husband. I still had to be a business owner to some extent. But my ability to do those things was so affected negatively that I was operating at like a small fraction of what I normally could operate at because I'm just so consumed by it.
And you need that, and that perspective is useful, and it like fizzles out with time, but it's useful to remind yourself of. I know for me, from like an injury perspective, there was a time when I had hurt my back. I mean, you remember when I went back to New York to see Dross because my back was so messed up.
Yeah.
I remember that at the time, like all I wanted was to be out of pain. I was like, I never need to like lift heavy again. Never need to like run again. Like in the moment, I would tell this to myself. Like I was convinced I'm perfectly fine. Never again having to do any of those things. Yeah. I just like want to be able to like tie my shoes without it like hurting so bad.
Yep.
And then you get to do those things and you like slowly work yourself back. And I've been very fortunate that now, you know, I've had this like sciatic pain that now is like, you know, going away, but never something to that extent. And I'm doing everything in my power to never have to experience something like that again. But, you know, surely you get to the point where you're like, like I do want this thing again. And I do want this thing. And then you do. And like, it's fine to go back there, but I think it's good perspective to remember the time where like, this is the one thing that mattered and incorporate that into which something that I still struggle with, incorporating that with the goals that I have in the training and trying to acknowledge the fact that like, sometimes I might be doing more harm than good to the end goal of like not getting injured, not being in pain again. But I get so like myopic about like, I'm training for this marathon. I have a plan. I have a hard run tomorrow. I'm kind of not feeling good. The red flags are totally there, but like, it almost feels like if I miss it, I'm like throwing the plan out the window.
Right.
And that's when it's important to remember those times where like, there was a time where like all I wanted was to just not be in pain. Like just take the day off, take the 2 days off. And I think this goes into the other thing we want to talk about what else do you think was kind of going on that led to this being the time of like, you know, being the sickest, the longest ever in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was burnt out. You know, I think when you're overly stressed in the moment, you don't even have the awareness to realize it perhaps. But like as soon as I had to just stop and slow down and could have some perspective on like the speed at which I was operating for the past few months, maybe several months, maybe a few years. It dawned on me like I had too much going on all at once. I thought I could manage it. And I just reached a point of burnout where I think that ultimately is what definitely kicked me into to getting sick.
I know we're definitely not experts on this stuff, but I'm curious, like, because I know that you've done a lot of research on this stuff and are just well read. What is it about when you stop that makes it like almost like the rubber band snaps and that's when people like tend to get sick or the burnout seems to happen? Because I've experienced that too. It's like while you're actually like running like a chicken without a head, like where you're in it, you tend to be fine. And if anything, you can kind of like roll with the punches to an extent. But like what's happening that it's literally when you like finally take a deep breath and maybe have like the day off or the weekend off and you can finally relax. That, like that's when like everything just kind of like piles up on you.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't tell you the physiology around it or even if there is like well-researched and backed physiological mechanisms that lead to that. But like anecdotally, you hear that story over and over and over again. So there's just got to be something psychological around it. I mean, I don't know. There might be some kind of physical component to it as well, just as far as like the hormones that are running through your system when you're switched on the way you need to be. And then when you finally like slow down, everything just kind of like dampens and goes below a normal baseline. But yeah, I think it's largely probably going to be psychological, what leads to that. Where something just finally switches off and your system just goes like, all right, dude, you pushed us a little too far.
I was talking this with you yesterday. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and it makes me think about this as well, is just how powerful the mind is in regulating everything. Like I have a new appreciation for that reading the book Endure, which again, I'm like, 3-4 chapters in, but it just does such a good job and has so many real examples of this whole idea. We talked about this on another podcast episode that our like gas tank, our capacity, our endurance is partly, and the argument the book makes is actually much greater than maybe people expected in the past, regulated by our mind and our psychology, not so much just like, hey, VO2 max and running efficiency, and that like dictates what you can go and like run a marathon in or whatever.
Yep.
There seems to be a lot of both anecdotal and now more hard evidence that there's just something about your mind knowing that you're running 26.2 miles or you're running a 10K, and it sets these defense mechanisms to kind of like make sure that you don't go too in the red, because your body's constantly trying to defend itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fascinating how, they had that example of the woman who had to have a surgery because she had a seizure issue. Right. And it removed a piece of her brain, or impacted a piece of her brain, where she like really lost like short-term memory. And she was always a runner, but she became like a world record setting ultra marathoner, like these crazy, like multiple day races.
Yeah.
In large part because she like couldn't remember all the work that she had done to that point, and also couldn't like really think ahead of all the work that's coming. And being an endurance athlete, like reading the book has been fascinating because it's so true in so many respects, in that you're constantly thinking about, like, you're doing a long run, you're doing a workout. I've never run a marathon. I've trained for a marathon, but I'm assuming this would happen then too. You're either constantly thinking about the 10 miles you've done or the 16.2 miles you have left. That's all you're thinking about. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that your mind is what's going to dictate the pace that you can push to, how uncomfortable you are. And it's impossible to obviously like be able to turn that switch off, or imagine like, how would I feel if I had no idea how much I had left, or I had no idea how much I had run. You can't, put yourself in that position unless you were, in some crazy edge case like this lady. Mm-hmm. But it is really, really fascinating now that I'm like reading all this hard science about, to what we're talking about, like what impact it probably has for you to know that, hey, this stressful season in my life is now behind me, or I have all this crazy stuff coming up. And how much better off would you be if you could like detach from that, or you wouldn't be able to forget it, but just kind of like let it be instead of like simmering on it or focusing so much on the future. And I know that's where like mindfulness practices and all that kind of meditation and all that stuff helps, but it's tough because all that stuff's so abstract. It's not as simple as like, just training. Like you want to get stronger, squat. Like how do you separate the constant stress of like what you did and what you have coming up?
Yeah.
Anything you did like or want to do now a little bit more? Like how are you taking this experience and like moving forward to hopefully not get to this point again?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely just need to slow down. Like I was so focused on, to kind of use the same metaphor that you were talking about, as far as like being either present, past minded or future minded. I had a few things that I was trying to work on that were like, out in the future, that I didn't really have a good certainty around whether or not they were actually going to happen or be successful, or whether they were even like the right decisions to be making as far as like the direction that I should be heading with respect to like some business stuff and career stuff. And so so much of my attention over the course of the day was directed outward to like things that weren't currently part of my reality, so my attention was so diverted from the things that are right in front of me that actually really matter, that are real, that are actually happening as far as like my business and personal life. And so much of my attention then was getting directed outward, and I was so distracted by it. And I think that was one realization I had when I had to kind of just stop and slow down, is like, I need to focus on what is currently in front of me, the business that I currently have, make the most of my current situation before I prioritize trying to create other opportunities or build this or build that. So that's going to be a big change for me over the course of like the next few months, is just really, really focusing in on, what's in front of me and and making the most of those things versus trying to create a bunch of new opportunities.
Easier said than done. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Easier said than done.
You need a balance. Of course, you need a balance. You still want to have growth, and you still want to have things to look forward to and challenge yourself. But it needs to be like, just as an example, like I signed up for that strongman competition.
I was going to bring that up.
I mean, that was stretching me physically. I had a couple things just working like business wise that I was trying to get going. And it was just too much all at once. So maybe just one thing at a time would be a good way to prioritize that.
I was going to bring up, how do you think, so we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we're super excited for you to do the strongman competition, got you to sign up. I know you were really you've always trained. You've always, been a big, like, strike when the iron's hot. But you said as soon as you signed up, like, you did have to focus a little bit more on training. There's more motivation. So I'm sure the intensity definitely went up. Do you think, obviously it's never just one thing, but do you think that was something that you would have done a little bit differently, even though you were training for this event? Like, was it too much change too quick, or not really, given the fact that you were always at this baseline and it was just a little bit different movements and different stuff, or did it really ratchet up big time? Because I know that's something that, like, I'm guilty of all the time.
Yeah. I don't think the training really made that much of an impact.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like we talked about this already, but certainly I had to start learning some new movements, which the novelty of that wasn't really stressful. It was actually fun.
Right.
The intensity certainly ratcheted up a bit, but if anything, like the overall volume of my training was less,
Right.
So right. As long as I managed that, I think that allowed me to still pursue that without it being overly stressful. I don't think the physical training really had that much of an impact on this. I mean, of course, yeah, it contributed to it.
It's one other thing.
Of course. Right. But I don't think it was one like the major factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the takeaway for the average person? Like, were there any red flags, and how would you approach, like, starting to feel like something's coming on? Because I guess, taking a step back, do you think there was ever a point, because you said, caught something, whether it was COVID or anything else, that turned into like, was there ever a point where you feel like if you would have just, hey, I'm taking this for what it is, shut it down completely, you could have avoided it turning into like this 10-day thing? And
No.
if so, you think it was like, it was coming?
It was pretty abrupt. Like,
yeah.
I remember the Thursday night I went in, I wasn't feeling great. I was kind of like tired. I wasn't feeling like I was getting sick necessarily, which I'm pretty in tune with my body. And like, I have a good awareness of that stuff. And I have good awareness also of like when it's appropriate to just like kind of train through it and just kind of push through, or when I really need to back off. And Thursday I went in, I did a relatively easy workout just because I wasn't feeling great. And then Thursday night I got hit with like full on fever, aches and pains. And Friday morning I woke up like I got hit by a truck. Like it was pretty much like a 12-hour turnaround, even less than that, to where I went from feeling okay to just like not being able to move, like literally not being able to move. So it wasn't like a few days of like, I don't feel great, maybe I need to back off and not push myself. It just from overnight, it just went from feeling all right to just terrible. So yeah, I mean, I think you do in general have to have some kind of awareness of when it's appropriate to push through, when it's appropriate to back off. I'd say as a rule of thumb, if you're not feeling great, you're feeling pretty run down, you'd at the very least want to pull back on the volume, the intensity of your workouts. Maybe sometimes just moving and going through the motions and getting the blood flowing actually makes you feel better and might even promote feeling better and avoiding sickness. But you really have to ensure that you're not trying to push too hard when your system is already kind of starting to feel run down. And I think most people know that intuitively. There's going to be people that are stubborn that push too hard through those things. But I think after you do that a couple times, hopefully you learn your lesson the hard way and you'll avoid doing that in the future.
Yeah. Rule of thumb I've heard is symptoms are like neck and up, that you're pretty fine to like do something. So like if it's like stuffy nose, whatever, just like gunk coming out, cough, like it's fine. But neck down, meaning that it's like systemic. Obviously, if you have like a fever, if you have like chills, body aches, then that tends to be like a pretty hard line to like, all right, your body needs rest if it gets to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good rule of thumb.
But man,
one of the things too, like that this really highlighted, because I went into this with a pretty high baseline as far as my health, my fitness. And I mean, it completely knocked me on my ass. And one of the things I kept thinking about over and over again as I was going through it, I was like, man, like someone that did not like that goes into something like this from a fairly low baseline of health and just in terms of their overall wellness and how they feel, like this would kill you. Like, how does this not kill somebody that is otherwise not healthy, that is going through this? It just must be such a absolutely miserable experience to get that sick when you're already coming into it from like a dampened state of wellness. So, and this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast, like just this creating this buffer or this hedge of wellness, of fitness, health, whatever you want to call it, how important it is when you do get knocked on your ass, because you actually have the ability to get through it, to recover in a reasonable amount of time. It won't leave like too much of a mark permanently where it's going to have a negative impact on you for, call it weeks, months, years. So again, it just speaks to the importance of like prioritizing health and how you have to just put as much into that account as you possibly can and bank it. Because when eventually, like, you know, I was someone that maybe naively would claim that like I never get sick. You know, the same way I talk about I never get hurt. You know, it's just like my mentality around it. Like, you know, I don't have time to get sick or hurt. Like, you know, it's just never going to happen. And of course, eventually it's going to happen. But if you if you do what you need to do and put yourself in a situation where when it does actually happen, you can actually handle it. You know, it's just so important.
That's another thing that like requires such a fine balance, because I think that there's a huge benefit specifically when it comes to like the injury conversation. I know Jason was like blown away by the fact that you never like approach a deadlift, even considering the fact that like, hey, this might hurt my back.
Right.
And I think that that's a good thing, right? Like obviously you're doing things that are well within your ability. Like sure, you're getting close to what that limit is, but you've done it so many times. Like there's no reason for you to go in there. And going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like the mind is so powerful that I think that there's 100% a detriment to going in there afraid or nervous or like just putting out there that like, hey, this is a really heavy weight. Like if I'm ever going to hurt my back, it's going to be doing this weight, doing this thing.
Right.
You're not doing yourself any favors there. So I think it's very helpful in that respect to have the mentality that you have of like, I mean, I'm not going to get hurt. I don't get sick. I'm healthy, so on and so forth. But how do you balance that with, you know, being aware that like these things are going to happen? Because I think that especially on the sick front, how does that not make you ignore maybe the red flags when they are? I know this came on, you know, pretty quick, but ignore the red flags when they come on early on, or just being aware of them.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the same conversation around getting hurt, right? Like you develop confidence that you're not going to get hurt because you train for a certain amount of time, a certain way where you create a buffer against getting injured, right? So again, you guys talk about this all the time, this idea of earned confidence. I think it's the same thing around health. Like if you do what you need to do in terms of your daily habits and your lifestyle and your nutrition and your training, and you're checking off all the boxes as far as what you need to do to keep yourself healthy, you're going to earn that same confidence that you're not going to get sick, right? So I don't think it's any different in terms of the mindset and the approach. It just, you know, one takes place in the walls of the gym, one takes place outside the walls of the gym. You know, and I have that mentality around not getting sick because I do what I need to do every single day to make sure that I don't get sick. Right? I'm not just crossing my fingers and hoping that I don't get sick and eat like shit and don't sleep and you know, like I'm doing what I need to do to be able to earn that mindset around it. So it's no different than the conversation around getting hurt in the gym. At least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Kind of a segue, kind of not a segue. But dude, I was getting freaked out listening to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on a podcast.
Okay. Yeah. I know who she is. Yeah.
They were talking about cancer. And dude, like,
yeah.
And it's kind of like
the topic.
The reason it's kind of a segue is like, I don't know, how much do you worry about this stuff versus like, how much do you just do all the things that are in your control and like, you know, like that's what's in your control. Right. Because what she was talking about specifically is that, and I didn't know this, that there are so many early screening options now. There are full body MRIs, full body CT scans, like blood tests that you can do, and essentially advocating for the fact that like you shouldn't just wait until you're whatever the age is, like for example for men of being like 45 or 50, get a colonoscopy. Like there are ways to like figure out like, hey, is any of this, because early detection is everything.
Right.
And like I looked it up afterwards. I looked up like places around here, like costs. It just got me thinking. But it's like, I don't know, to what extent do you like constantly looking for everything all the time, even worrying about it or giving you mental stress, versus like just like, hey, I do all the things that I can do. But cancer is just such a scary one, man, because I feel like everyone knows or has a story of someone that like, dude, perfectly healthy, perfectly fine. I mean, I swam with dude, one of the nicest guys, Truman Liang. I'll never forget. He was on my high school team. Nicest guy ever, and like an absolute beast of a human. Got a full ride swimming scholarship to Northwestern. Was just like the guy that like you wanted to be and aspire to be. And I don't know, like 6 years after graduating high school, we all got an email. He got small cell lung cancer, and like took him out quick. Right. Never smoked, never nothing, athlete, good student. And I feel like I'm sure that everyone has one of those stories. Like everyone knows someone that like doesn't make sense.
Of course.
Dude. And it's just like, especially now, these like conversations, these thoughts too, like just also take a completely different dimension now with a family and kids.
Yeah.
Because it's not even about like, you know, like your life and like what's going to happen there, but like, dude, there are people that depend on me now. You know, it's like little humans that like you want to provide everything for years and years and years and be around. And, you know, I know that you're also doing all the things that you can do to like, you know, not only be here, but like be here and be healthy and be active and like do all the things, and like constantly thinking in my mind, like, you know, when having the first, like the daddy daughter dance with my daughter. And like, I think about these memories all the time that like are going to require me to be here for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So listening to this stuff just completely spins me out, maybe more than it should, about like, am I doing enough? Like, is there other things I should be doing? Is there other like, you know, like the testing and like figuring out and like genetic testing, like what am I like predisposed to? And like just getting in front of all those things. But it's also like super stressful. Like you can
drive yourself absolutely
spin
crazy.
Yourself into like, oh my God.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, those are deep questions and deep issues. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, right? It's like depends on your personality. And, you know, my approach probably is and always will be, you know, obviously now I'm getting older, so that becomes more and more of a concern, but just focus on the things that you have control over, right? Because just a portion of that is just completely out of your control. It's dumb luck, perhaps. You know, so it's like you have certain levers that you can pull to put yourself in the best situation possible to avoid that, to avoid any kind of sickness. And what can you do other than just focus on those things? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever did you know about that? Like the full body MRIs and stuff?
Yeah, I've caught wind of some of that stuff. I mean, I'm not well versed in any of it.
Yeah.
I know that they've certainly made like huge advancements in that technology that hopefully within the next few years will be more widespread and more accessible to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just like on the periphery, I've just heard people talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. That stuff is always super scary. The other thing too is, you know, not getting super wound up. Like I know one big thing for us now, specifically like in this season, and I know that it's temporary, is there are going to be some things that used to be in my control that just aren't. Like sleep is a huge one. Like I've always like, I need really good sleep and I don't mess around with it. I know how important it is, but I also just like, dude, I feel terrible if I don't get good sleep. And I've always been a morning person. I like really enjoy getting up early and getting my workout done early. And I can't do that if I stay in bed late or if I get like a bad night of sleep. But dude, with the kids, it's just impossible. And the kids at this age, like there's no planning for it. There's no expecting it. One night out of the blue, Shay was just going to like wake up 6 times in the middle of the night, like crying hysterically. Yeah. And you're going to go in, you're going to do whatever you need to do, you know?
Of course. Yeah.
But I think that for me, at least, I used to stress out about that stuff unnecessarily, but I've definitely now, it becomes another reason to focus on the other things a little bit more. Like it's almost like having all these little dials that I have. And I know that this one's like stuck right now. but that means that I can dial up like the other ones and just make sure that I just have another reason to be a little bit more tuned in over here, because this thing is just like, it is what it is. Like there's literally nothing you can do to improve that.
Right.
And getting frustrated about it is not doing anyone any favors.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty good perspective on everything.
Yeah. But the young kids, man, the young kid stage. And I know a lot of, young parents, it's also like one of the things that seems like it's forever, or seems like one of the most like daunting or like tough parts of like having like really young kids. But man, it is temporary. Like we've seen it with, Charlie being like, 9 months, 10 months, everyone kind of getting into a little bit of routine. Because in the beginning, when we first had Charlie, and so she was like super young, a baby, and we had, Shay, who still wasn't even 2, like that was, I got messy for a while.
Yeah. It's when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like you come away from that, like, it's funny because like when you're a year or two removed from that, like you're totally going to forget how hard it was, some of the moments where you were like ready to throw one of them out of the window, like you totally just like, you don't even remember that stuff. Yeah.
What's the age difference again between Hunter and Hope?
They're 2 years apart.
2 years apart.
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. I remember like, I remember being hard, and I remember there were being times where you're exhausted and stressed, and but like in hindsight, mostly the memories are just like wonderful.
Of course, 100%.
Like, you don't think of it from a negative perspective of like how hard it actually was. It's all just like how much fun it was.
But it's funny, like we were talking about before, like it's so easy to not focus on the present when it's almost like I guess a good thing, right? Like you're so focused on the future, like what might go wrong or the big thing you need to get done. But when it's like the tough times, like you're so focused on the present. Yeah. It's like the complete opposite. You're like hyper focused on like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping. This is going to last forever. It's not going to get better. It's going to impact my workouts, my energy levels, work, whatever. You can't have the same mentality then of like, this is going to pass. And even if it's like a year long, it's a year long in the grand scheme of like nothing. Like it's a drop in the bucket. It's so easy. As humans, we're just so hardwired to like just do everything that's like counterproductive to us just being chill.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Like focus on the bad, forget the good. Yeah. You have to be so intentional about just like getting out of your own freaking way.
Well, that speaks to, one of the other takeaways I had from being sick was like I've never gone that long without training. As for as long as I can remember, like my whole life since I've been working out, I've never spent 2 weeks without working out. And like mentally, how that impacted me was fascinating. Like it felt like I just had like this lump in my head that I couldn't get out. Like it was just like, it's like lodged in there and everything was just stuck and like nothing was working properly. Like my mood, my thoughts, just my whole like psychology around everything was so negatively impacted by not being able to do things like do hard physical things that it just, again, speaks to like, I don't know how people don't exercise. I mean, of course, their perspective is their perspective. If they don't do it, if they're not accustomed, if they've never experienced the psychological benefits of doing it, obviously that shifts their perspective on it. But man, like I've said this before, I really do think the primary benefits of exercise are psychological as opposed to physiological. And of course, there are many, many physiological benefits to exercise. And you can't argue one is more important than the other. But I think that we downplay how important physical activity is to our mental health. And to just spend 2 weeks not being able to do anything physical and just feeling stuck like that, you can just see how people can just unravel mentally if they don't engage in regular physical activity.
Is Jen the same way, like to the same extent, or is she a little bit more like, she'll take her off days a little more, wouldn't be a big deal, or exactly?
Jen has to do something physical every single day. Yeah. Big time. Even more so than me.
Really?
Yeah. Like Jen has a full kind of ritual in the morning when she wakes up. She goes through a full like kind of yoga sequence and a meditation. And if she doesn't start her day with that, like that will already set her off for not having a great day. And she pretty much has to do some kind of exercise, even if it's just something moderate, something easy, pretty much every single day.
Man, I love Coach Jen. I have so many incredible Coach Jen memories. But, it brings up something that I think, and, you obviously share this, something we're incredibly fortunate in that, like, our significant others are completely on the same page about this. And I don't think that that's a prerequisite for like a strong relationship or what. I know that for a lot, I mean, Jason's a great example. He's talked about this. He recently recorded, I thought was an incredible episode with him and Ashley for Valentine's Day. I really enjoyed listening to that. But one thing that they talked about is that fitness has never been a passion of Ashley's. Like, she does it because it's like a thing that she knows she needs to do and it's important for her to feel good and just be healthy and so on and so forth. But they're on such opposite ends of the spectrum on like fitness and competitiveness and everything.
Right.
Where it's just so different, because for me, in Ariel, like, she will obviously make time, and not that Ashley doesn't, but using that as an example, for I know that a lot of couples out there, it isn't the same. And that can sometimes it's difficult to understand or communicate the importance of like, hey, this is really important for me. It's not like, time that I'm, spending selfishly, like, this is important so I could show up better and do this better. Like, that understanding can be a little different.
Yeah.
And also there could be friction of like, I know when guys start, or whether, it's the woman that starts, but like you start feeling better and you want your partner to come along on this ride. And that's always like very tricky situation, because you can't really pressure people into wanting to do that. It really has to like, they have to want to do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you encourage people to encourage the most important person in your life to, come along for this thing? And I'm always grateful that that's never been the case in our relationship. Like, obviously there's many other things that we've had to like grow and figure out and all of those things.
Yeah.
But the fact that fitness has always just been like, we both have to do something pretty much every day. And she gets that. I get that. We make time for it. We love doing it together, which is also really cool. If we ever get grandparents, like take care of the kids, our favorite thing to do if we're like traveling with grandparents and like they'll take them one morning is to visit a gym and go to a coffee shop. Like, I'll do that over any other like date situation that we can do. It's like, let's go to a global gym and like people watch and work out together. And it's like the funnest time. And then go get like coffee at a local coffee shop. Like, it's the best. Yeah,
of course.
But super lucky to have that.
If it's part of the fabric of who you are, like anything, it doesn't necessarily need to be fitness. It could be, I don't know, you're a wine lover, right? Like, so if it's that strong of a characteristic of your personality and your lifestyle and who you are as a person, like, there has to be some common ground there with your partner.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least an appreciation and understanding of how important it is to you, so that they can accommodate your lifestyle accordingly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I can only imagine how much more difficult of a conversation it would have been to like invest how much we invested in building out the gym that we have here if it was just like a passion of just one of ours and not both of ours, right? Like, for us,
Right.
It was like a no-brainer to like, hey, this is going to cost a lot, but like what we want to do is have a gym that's climate controlled, that's big enough to have the kids like year round, spend a bunch of time in there, have all the toys. Yep. It's like the easiest conversation with her in the world to be like, hey, should we get a reverse hyper? Yeah, we should get a reverse hyper.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Oh man. Our wish list of exercise equipment is never ending.
Same.
Luckily we have a decent amount of space.
Mm.
Have you seen the Concept 2 Strength Erg?
Yeah, I saw it.
You haven't seen it like in person though, right? Like,
no.
You haven't tried it out? I'm so curious. Like, I don't think I understand it.
I think I understand it, and I think it's cool, but I think it has very limited utility. Like, I'm pretty sure you can basically do 3 exercises on it. You can do a leg press, you can push with your upper body, and then you can row with your upper body.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, unless I'm missing something.
No, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's creative ways to like, I don't know, incorporate like some unilateral stuff. So I think it's a great concept. And I think there's utility for it, especially like in older populations or people that have some real like physical limitations that still need to do some resistance training. But
it would be a very safe way to do resistance training.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like the actual mechanism of like how it provides the resistance is very cool. It's like that kind of like compression based resistance. I've used stuff like that before. Like the Kaiser machine, Kaiser has a machine like that I've used, and it's great, and really accessible and super safe. But again, it's a pretty big, relatively expensive piece of equipment for being able to effectively do 3 things on it, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, and maybe I got to get on there and experience it to offer a more educated opinion on it. But yeah, it looks pretty cool.
How much is it? Do you know? I'm sure we can look.
I don't know. I'm sure you can find out. Yeah.
Concept 2 stuff is like meant to last a long time. I mean, those rowers are built to like.
Oh, dude, we still have the original rowers from our gym when we opened up 15 years ago.
Yeah. The new assault bikes are a little different, and those are a little bit more robust, but
yeah.
Dude, Concept 2. I want a Concept 2 bike. That's what I want.
Yeah. We got a bunch of those at the gym now. Yeah. Just so, and speaking of exercise, so I came back, after the little layoff, whatever it was, 2 weeks, and I had to like start finding ways to like start working out again, like just easing my way back in. And I did like my first day back, I just did like a real easy upper body, like bodybuilding workout, super light, super low volume, didn't push it. I mean, it felt great just to like use my muscles and use my body and be physical again. But I really was cautious around like not doing too much. Came back the next day, did like a little kettlebell circuit just to kind of like see if I could breathe and get my heart rate up a little bit, which I couldn't at all. But again, like relatively, like really super conservative as far as the weights, the volume, the intensity of it. And like my body responded okay to those first 2 days. I came back the third day and I did like some yoke carries, which was a fucking terrible idea. And just like pull-ups and push-ups. Yeah. And I was moving at like a super moderate pace. Certainly the yoke carries were not heavy relative to what I've done in the past. I ended up doing like 60 strict pull-ups and 120 push-ups combined with some yoke carries, like 100-foot yoke carry. And I was mangled, like destroyed. And it I overdid it. Like to the point where I was like, I might have just made myself sick again, like that night. And, I think it just, but and then since then I've been gradually just kind of like each day trying to like just add a little bit more. But being super conservative, but it offered me a perspective on someone that is a beginner, like someone that's never exercised before. You don't even realize how little stimulus they need to like move the needle a little bit in terms of like the mark it's going to leave on their body. And how gradual that process needs to be for those people, and one of the things I think we've fallen victim to, especially in the world of CrossFit, is someone that's new to it. You try to impress them so quickly with how hard the workouts can be and, some of the bells and whistles around some of the fancier movements. But it just gives you, when you have to take a break like this and ease your way back in, an appreciation for like what it is to be a beginner and how easy and how gradual it has to be initially, especially if you're going to be able to sustain it. Because like I could even see just from doing that one workout, the way my body responded to it. For someone that's not accustomed to that and doesn't even really know how to like understand what's happening physically to them in response to that, how quickly they would be discouraged and would just give up. It's like this is too hard. This is not for me. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate
because the importance, man. When someone is new, or a beginner to this stuff, a novice, whether you're coming back from a big layoff, and this may be good information for people that are listening that might find themselves in that situation. Like when you come back, you really got to pull back on the intensity, the volume. Just move a little bit, and then move a little bit more, and move a little bit more, and make it a very gradual process.
So this brings up a question that I'm like genuinely super interested in. What is going on specifically when it comes to soreness, what is going on there with you taking 2 weeks off and that making your muscles like that sore? Because 2 weeks doesn't seem like enough time for like the actual like muscles to be that deconditioned to that type of volume.
Yeah.
And then follow-up question to that is I've heard, and maybe you can just do a better job explaining this. Like I've heard, and this makes a lot of intuitive sense to me, even though for some people it might just kind of be like one of those moments like, oh, like I hadn't thought about it that way, but that soreness isn't the best, like signal that you quote unquote got a good workout, effective workout. Like you're actually not trying to be mangled after every workout. And I can speak to that 100% because it's actually really hard for me, given the volume that I'm doing and the work that I'm doing, to be like ever super, super sore again. Like I really have to find like a new way to like hit a specific muscle group or really have Ariel going out there and like spotting me and like getting a bunch of reps past failure and stuff to like really be sore. I always feel like I did something, right, but I'm not really sore, but I still see progress. So I know now in my mind, at least based off of that it's not that I need to be sore every time to see progress. So what's going on there with like just 10 days off and soreness, and what soreness really tell you about like the efficacy of your workout?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was because I literally did nothing. Like the most activity I had for those 10 days or really 2 weeks was like walking up and down my stairs, which was exhausting, by the way, when I did it. I would have to like sit down on my bed after walking up the stairs. So I think it was just the extent to which I really was inactive that affected that. If I was like normally active and still just kind of like engaging in normal daily activities, I don't think it would have been that extreme. But like I lost a significant amount of muscle mass and I was really inactive for really about a 2 week period. I think that's what really led to that. And again, the workout was relative to what I had been doing up to that point. I mean, incredibly benign as far as like the weights and the volume. But yeah, it was just relative to what I had done for the past 2 weeks. It was like fairly extreme. And then soreness, geez, it's a pretty complicated subject. I think one of the more interesting things that I think it's like a largely misunderstood subject. I think the science around it has evolved quite a bit over the past, call it 10, 20 years, maybe even more recent than that. Where I think a lot of the mechanisms that people thought led to soreness were either never proven true or debunked or proven otherwise. One of the more interesting explanations I've ever heard about it was from Julian Pineau from StrongFit. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to do it justice as far as like the physiological mechanism in place here that explains it. But, my just kind of surface level understanding of it was that it's really more of a nervous system response than anything. Like you elicit a certain amount of damage to your tissue and your nervous system responds in turn by creating soreness to protect itself so that you don't turn around the next day and do the same thing and put yourself in a situation where you potentially hurt yourself. That just intuitively makes sense. Like for someone that trains a lot, for you to get sore, you have to do something pretty extreme, like way outside the norm of what you normally do. And someone that trains regularly with a fairly good amount of intensity and volume, it's pretty rare that you experience at least extreme levels of soreness. And there's ways, I think that's sort of like there's ways in which that can be, that theory, I suppose, can be proven in that there's, what's it called? I'm not exactly sure the term that they use to explain this, but like you can take a workout and perform it on Monday and it elicits a certain amount of soreness in your body. And I don't know how you objectively measure that, but whatever, just subjectively, you're sore to a certain extent. And then you can perform that same workout, call it a week or two later, and you won't become nearly as sore. And, you're just, there's something going on psychologically within your nervous system that understands that it's not going to get hurt. Like it understands that this is a stimulus that it's used to, it's been exposed to before, and it won't elicit the same amount of damage and soreness the second time around. So yeah, I think it's mostly, to me, that's always just intuitively makes the most sense as far as what creates soreness.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense because I definitely had that experience where it's literally the second session doing the same movements, possibly going heavier, doing the same volume. Like everything else pretty much stays the same, if not a little bit more. And the soreness is nowhere near the same.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of intuitive sense given the fact that like adaptation also is very slow. So it's not like those muscles are that much more robust or stronger or anything really changed physiologically. It makes sense that it's a lot just up here, which goes back to where we started the episode in that it's all just in your head. All just in your head.
Yes, seemingly.
Good way to come full circle. Dude, so the segment of the challenge of the week, we might as well just talk about it here. I know that you didn't do it. Jason will not listen to this before next week, and I'll continue to give him a hard time so that hopefully he does it and we can talk about it next week. But I did it. And a 2K row, I immediately regretted being the one to come up with the idea. It seemed so like, oh, whatever. I've been doing a lot of rowing. You know, I'm doing like rowing, kind of like assault bike intervals most mornings, prepping for this high rocks, especially since I can't run. Yeah. So I was like, I'll do that and bench press. Like, who doesn't love bench press? And, but like testing a 2K row is just such a different beast.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling of dread.
Oh, and
it
like
just settles in at like 90 seconds.
So it's funny, like last week we were supposed to record. I thought Jason was going to be on, and I usually do the challenge that we set for the podcast, like as my Tuesday workout before we record. And the reason I kept asking Jason if he was going to be on is because I did not want to do it. And I knew that if he wasn't going to be on, you weren't going to be on, MDV isn't doing it, I could definitely give myself another week to do it.
Hell yeah.
And as soon as he said that he wasn't going to be on, I was like, okay, I'm not doing this week. We're just going to punt it to this week. But I did it on Saturday, and man, I told you I've been reading Endure. So like I'm rowing, and the 2K row, I've done it a handful of times now. It sucks.
Yeah.
You do the first 500 meters and you're like, dude, I'm going to set a world record time. I'm on pace for like a 6:30 here, and I feel great.
It hasn't even started yet.
Like effortlessly pulling a pace that's going to be much faster than what you're going to do. And even though I know that and I've tested that, you still like are, 300 meters in and you're like, oh man, today's going to be a good day. Then you get into the second 500 and that's when it gets real. That's when you know that like, okay, this is going to suck. This is going to be terrible. It's going to take everything in my power to like get close to what I've done in the past. If that. Yeah. If not, and that's where you also, at least for me, make the decision of like, today's going to be a go for it day, or today's going to be like it's a 720. It was a good effort. Yeah. Once you get past the first 1,000 and you've made that decision, at least for me, like you're committed. At that point, you're just like, you're committed, and you have to get to like, I like getting to the point where it's like 500 meters left, because then I just take it 100 meters at a time. Yeah. And you can always just push 100 meters. Just get to 400, get to 300. Just keep telling yourself that like you're that close. But then in my mind, because again, like I think that it would be close between me and Jason here. I know that he can row a lot faster than me, but A, I'm counting on the fact that he's not going to go RP10. Right. And then B, the score, so the way I did it, this is kind of based off that rogue challenge, is you have to take exactly 1 minute rest and then do a max set on the bench press body weight. Right. And for every rep, it's 5 seconds off your time. Right. Now, ideally, if I were to go back and do it again, I wouldn't sell out as much as I did on the 2K, because I just went for the 2K. And the reason was I was like on the cusp of like being under 7. And I was like, man, like under 7's like, like, hey, I can still rub a sub 7. Yeah, it's a legit score. Yeah. So I was like, I'm not going to go like a 7:10. Right. Which I think would have been the move to like, because I think that definitely would have given me more on the bench. And that 10-second difference is like everything. Oh, yeah. Huge. So I'm pushing and I'm pushing and I'm thinking of this stupid book, and I'm like, dude, like your legs are fine. Your VO2 max is fine. Like it's literally just your mind telling you that you're messed up. Yeah. So I'm like, oh God. And I'm like pushing and pushing. And anyway, I get 6:58, and it's also one of those things where the moment you finish, you're like 7 out of 10, especially because you had that like last little bit. That last little like jolt of energy to finish strong. Right. So like I finish and I'm like, not that messed up. Like I get up, and then the minute rest, just lets it get worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, you have this minute rest to get on the bench, but like at 50 seconds into the rest, I felt significantly worse than I did coming right off the rower.
For sure.
It just all kind of like pools in your legs. You feel terrible. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing, because I was videoing this and the Rogue Challenge, which is a 5K run into it, the way that they describe is you literally have to have the bar unracked at the minute mark.
Okay, right.
So I was trying to adhere to that. So I'm looking at my watch, a little 5 seconds, like I'm trying to get my grip. I'm like unracking, but like I'm progressively feeling worse.
Yeah. And settling
so I
in.
finally have the bar unracked and I start benching. You can almost like catch your breath again as you're kind of like doing the first couple reps. Mm. But man, I was like 8 reps in and it wasn't even the benching. It was my legs. My legs in that like flexed position on the bench were just like, I wanted to get off that bench so bad because my legs, my hamstrings and my ass were on fire. Yeah. I am benching and I don't feel anything in my upper body. I just like my legs are screaming to just like walk around and move. I got 15 reps. I could have squeezed out more. Again, in terms of like, I could have squeezed out more, but as soon as it just got a little hard, I was like, I need to get off this bench. Yeah. I need to like remove this position because it was so uncomfortable, but it's a fun test. I highly recommend anyone listening to give it a shot.
I'm so glad I missed it. I'm so glad, dude. I have no intentions of ever rowing a 2K again. Not even like, especially for time. Like, I don't even want, I'm not going to row 2K leisurely. Never mind fast.
Oh man, it's such a.
Glad I missed that one.
You know, and a part of me and like the background that I have and the things that I've done forever, like enjoys it. Like I even now like recounting it, like I do enjoy that type of effort and going through like, you know, the whole like mental thing and whatever.
Yeah, I did too at one point.
Yeah.
I remember those days.
But man, in the moment. But anyway, the one thing I did not see coming was how the impact of everything pulling in your legs just made just sitting on the bench press. Like, I think I would have been just as uncomfortable and like needed to get off the bench had I just been laying there in that position. Right. Like, I think the bench didn't have that much to do with the fact that I was just like, this needs to end right now.
Right.
But yeah, fun one. I'll see if I can beat Jay. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be close. I mean, he's not going to go that much faster than that on the row.
No, I mean, maybe like a 650. You could do a 650 and like, you know, still push less than I did, but that's just 2 reps on the bench. So yeah, we'll see. Cool. It'll be fun. All right.
Well, I'm tapping out of that one.
Any last words here, Dan, on our, here's a final question. Just a fun one. Yeah. Is this going to be our year as Mets fans? What do you think? How are you feeling?
I'm never optimistic about the Mets, but yeah, I mean, coming off last year, there's probably good reason to be optimistic because that was something else.
I know, but that's how they set you up. That's how they set you up for the heartbreak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Soto's going to be what he's cracked up to be, but we'll see. Who knows?
We'll see. It'll be fun, man. Yeah. It'll be fun. Their season opener is here in Houston. I'm going with Shay.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be so fun. Yeah. Nice. And he's still like, you know, he's at the age where he's not going to remember any of this. It's 100% for me. But last year we went when the Mets came to play the Rangers. So I want to do it every year and just me and him go. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's
like
fun
establishing those traditions is like the best.
Yeah. Baseball games are great.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully next week we'll have the full squad back and we'll have some good conversations, but I think that's it for this week. Guys, if you enjoy the podcast, any of the episodes, whether it's home team, the guest episodes that we have, the ones with me and Jay, we love hearing back from you guys. So please email in any feedback, any topics you want us to hit in the future, even the comments on Spotify. I look at those. We don't get a bunch there, but if there's anything that you want us to see, hear, talk about in the future, please, there's so many ways to let us know. DM Jason, DM me, DM the podcast. But if you enjoyed what you heard today, please share it with a friend, leave a rating, a review, and we'll be back next time on the Jason Khalipa Podcast with Jason next time. See you guys.
Yep. Later.